Hi, I'm Clyde. And before we get into the quiet little alley in Tokyo, where I somehow ended up folding paper lanterns, which wasn't on my plan for the day, but honestly, nothing ever is, I want to give you a chance to get cozy. If you haven't already, you can tap, like now, so you don't forget later when your eyes get heavy. And if you want to wander through more of these sleepy, boring adventures of mine, there's a whole playlist waiting for you. It's full of me doing things like watching paint dry and listening to clocks and, well, this. Paper lanterns. And if you ever want a personal sleepy story from me, you can become a channel member and I'll make one just for you. But only if you want to, no pressure, of course. Now, let's go back to Tokyo. The year is 1895. It's late evening, cool, and the kind of quiet where every sound seems softer than usual. Even the distant footsteps sound like they're wearing socks. I'm sitting cross-legged on the stones of a narrow alley, one of those cozy little lanes tucked between wooden houses with paper windows, glowing lanterns hanging from doorway hooks and swaying just a tiny bit in the breeze. They cast warm pools of light that wobble across the ground, like reflections on water. In front of me is a small stack of thin, cream-colored paper. It's surprisingly crisp, almost too crisp for the very humid air, and smells faintly like rice flour. I don't know why, but I always smell things when I travel. It helps anchor me. This paper smells a bit like someone steamed a bun too long. I'm trying to fold a lantern the way I saw an older gentleman do earlier, except he did it with the kind of effortless grace that suggested he'd been folding lanterns since the day he was born. He bent the corners in one smooth motion, hardly looked, and whoosh, a perfect lantern appeared. Mine is more of an interpretive attempt. I fold a little triangle here, a lopsided crease there. One part poofs out strangely like a startled pigeon, but I keep going because sometimes the act of making something badly is more relaxing than making something well. Somewhere nearby, a cat lets out a slow, complaining meow, the kind that sounds like it's been inconvenienced by its own existence. I look over and see it perched on a wooden step, staring at me as though I'm intruding on its alley. It's a little orange tabby, which is funny because I keep running into orange cats in all different centuries, and I'm starting to wonder if it's the same one traveling with me. Maybe it knows how the stone works. Maybe it's my supervisor. Hard to say. A bicycle leans crookedly against the wall behind me. The front wheel wobbles slightly every time the breeze picks up, like it's also trying to stay awake. I wonder briefly who rode it last. Perhaps a student, or a merchant, or some kid who bought too many rice cakes and needed wheels to get home. I go back to folding. A few lanterns I finished earlier are glowing beside me. Plump little things in soft colors. A yellow one, a red one, a green one that leans to the left like it's tired. People walking past don't seem bothered by the strange foreigner making lanterns on their street. In 1895, Tokyo, the Meiji-era, is in full swing, and Western visitors aren't unheard of, though I'm probably more rumpled than most tourists. I'm halfway through another fold when I realize this one kind of looks like a fish. Maybe. A fish who's had a long life and a lot of emotional ups and downs, but I go with it. I pinch the tail, shape the fins a little, try to puff the body out, and once the candle goes inside, just a tiny one, the paper glows softly from within. The fish actually looks charming now, like it belongs on a festival banner. I hold it up proudly, and the breeze steals it right out of my hand. Up it floats, sails gently over my head, and continues down the alley like it's late for an appointment. I just watch it go. Somewhere behind me, the orange cat gives a dramatic blink, as if to say, "Saw that coming." And that's where this quiet evening really begins. After the little paper fish drifted away like it had somewhere more important to be, I stayed sitting there on the cool stones for a moment, just listening to the alley-breathe cities always have their own kind of breath, I think. even in 1895, Tokyo, which was growing fast, you could still hear pockets of quiet if you listened for them. The shuffle of gaiter sandals on stone, a soft conversation slipping between wooden house walls, the faint rustle of laundry swaying from a balcony up above. I brushed off a few stray bits of paper from my lap. The pieces scattered and twirled across the ground like they were trying to imitate the lanternfish, except they didn't float very far before giving up. One of them actually stuck to my boot. Very determined little scrap. A warm, gentle glow appeared near the corner of my vision. The lanterns hanging from the eaves above me had brightened with the deepening dusk. Their light is different from anything electric. Softer, a little wobbly, like it's unsure of itself but trying very hard. I was about to start folding another lantern, maybe a simple round one this time, something that didn't require the architectural precision of a fish, when I noticed someone standing a short distance away. A woman, probably in her early 60s, quietly watching me. She wore a deep blue kimono decorated with little white plum blossoms, and her hair was pinned up with a jade-colored comb. She wasn't alarmed or confused or even particularly curious. More like she was watching a play she had seen before and was waiting for her favorite part. I raised the half-folded paper in a sort of greeting. She bowed her head slightly. Not a full bow, more like the polite nod people give when they're acknowledging the existence of a very odd scene. She approached just a little, stepping carefully so as not to disturb the glowing lanterns around me. Her eyes drifted toward the direction my fish lantern had escaped. She murmured something in Japanese, soft and amused. And even though I didn't catch every word, I understood the feeling. Lanterns sometimes choose their own direction. That made me smile. I tried to fold another lantern while she watched, but my hands suddenly felt like they were under examination at a museum. I bent a crease, then another, then somehow folded inward when I should have folded outward. The woman made a tiny, muffled sound, the kind someone makes when they're holding in a laugh to be polite. To distract myself, I looked around the alley. A stray dog trotted by behind her, a scruffy, tan fellow with one ear bent in permanent confusion. He carried something in his mouth that looked suspiciously like a radish. I have no idea where he found a radish at this hour, but he seemed proud of it. Behind him, a man pushed a small wooden cart filled with bundles of brushwood. Every few steps he paused, adjusting the load in a way that suggested the cart had opinions about how it should be handled. The alley was alive in a gentle, unhurried way. Lanterns flickered. A crow perched on the edge of a tiled roof above us, tilting its head like it was judging my folding technique. Maybe it thought the first fish was a worthy attempt and was eagerly awaiting the sequel. The woman finally stepped forward and, without a word, knelt beside me. Her hands were steady and practiced. She picked up a fresh sheet of paper and began folding it in perfect, elegant motions. One crisp crease after another. It was like watching someone fold a soft breeze into a shape. I tried to follow along, mirroring her movements, but mine came out looking like something between a crushed dumpling and a philosophical question. She didn't correct me. She simply smiled, a tender, patient expression, and nudged my lantern gently, as if giving it permission to exist anyway. When she finished her own lantern, she held it between us. A perfectly folded little sphere, plump and delicate, like a peach made of moonlight. Then she surprised me. She placed it carefully in my hands, bowed her head once more, and walked away down the alley, leaving me with the glow of her lantern warming my palms. I watched her disappear around the bend, plum blossoms swaying on her kimono sleeve, and I sat there for a long moment, feeling a soft kind of gratitude you can't really describe, except maybe by folding it into a lantern and letting it drift somewhere quiet. After the woman in the plum blossom kimono disappeared around the corner, the alley settled into a deeper kind of calm, the sort that feels like it curls around your shoulders like a blanket. Even the air smelled different, a mix of warm lantern light, damp stone, and something cooking several houses away. It might have been miso soup, or possibly chestnuts, or a combination of both, which would be ambitious but not impossible. I set her gifted lantern beside my own attempts, and it looked like a proud parent supervising its awkward children. It glowed the steadiest too. Of course it did. I stretched my legs out in front of me, feeling the small pops and crackles in my knees. Time travel does not come with a warranty. I've noticed I shifted around until I was comfortable, or at least comfortably lopsided, and reached for another piece of paper. Before I made the first fold, the sounds of the alley changed again. A small parade was coming. Not a real parade with floats and drums, but the kind of subtle parade alleys often host when no one's paying attention. I like those the best. The first to appear was a boy, maybe 10 years old, wearing a short indigo yukata and wooden sandals that were clearly too big for him. Every step made a clack, clack, clack as he tried to keep them on his feet. He carried a stack of bamboo poles slung over one shoulder, far too tall for him, so he tilted to one side like a sapling in a windstorm. He slowed when he saw me, eyeing the little group of lanterns like I was running an informal lantern adoption service. His gaze flicked to the neat lantern the older woman had made, then to the paper disaster I was currently holding. He nodded once, solemnly, as though acknowledging that at least I was trying. Behind him came an older man with a small handcart full of fabric bundles. He hummed as he walked, a song with a rhythm that matched the squeaky wheel of the cart. Squeak, hum, almost musical if you listened long enough. He didn't seem to notice me at all, but the cart did. One of the bundles shifted, and something inside gave a soft mew. A kitten peeked out. A tiny, soot-gray kitten with one white paw and enormous eyes. It stared at me like it knew a secret about the universe, but wasn't ready to share it yet. Then the bundle sagged, and the kitten vanished back into the fabric folds, leaving me wondering if I had imagined the whole thing. As the humming man rolled past, the scruffy, radish-carrying dog from earlier trotted back into the alley, apparently still on its radish-based mission. He paused to sniff my lanterns, sneezed dramatically, and continued onward with the determination of someone heading to a very specific dinner party. I looked up at the rooftops and saw the same crow from earlier, hopping along the tiles. It made a low caw. Not unfriendly, just opinionated. It hopped again, fluffed its feathers, and then settled itself like a judgmental guardian of the alley. And then came the most surprising member of the parade, the man carrying what looked like an entire rack of ceramic bowls on a long wooden beam balanced over his shoulder. Dozens of bowls. Dozens all clinking together with a delicate musical chime. How he didn't break them was one of those mysteries I decided not to question. Some people have natural balance. Others are me. He gave me a warm nod as he passed, the bowls glinting in the lantern light like moonlit shells. When the parade of ordinary, wonderfully not ordinary people finally faded down the far end of the alley, the silence returned. But it was richer now, like the alley had shared a secret and was waiting for me to answer back. I picked up my half-folded lantern again, and this time, it didn't look half bad. I folded the last corner carefully, pressed down the crease with my fingertip, and puffed out the body gently until it held its shape. Not perfect, not even close, but it looked alive in a way that messy things often do. I placed it beside the others. The woman's lantern glowed proudly. My new one glowed shyly. The first fish-shaped lantern was somewhere off on an adventure. I smiled, leaned back on my hands, and watched the warm light flicker across the stones, feeling like I was part of the alley's rhythm now, part of Tokyo's quiet hum in 1895, and part of whatever would drift my way next. After the alley's little parade drifted away, the boy with the bamboo poles, the humming man with the kitten-laden cart, the radish dog, and the bowl-balancing acrobat, the quiet, settled again like an old friend returning to sit beside me. The lanterns around me glowed more brightly now, their colors warming the darkening air. The shadows around them softened, like everything in the alley was slowly sighing into evening. I looked down at my latest creation, the slightly lopsided lantern that seemed proud of itself despite its structural uncertainties, and decided it deserved a spot of honor. So I nudged it a little closer to the others, letting it join the glowing group like a new kid in a schoolroom. As I settled into a comfortable lean, which for me involves shifting around roughly 5 times before finding a position that lasts about 30 seconds, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from farther down the alley. Tap, 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 tap. Almost like someone gently knocking on a piece of wood. The tapping grew louder, and soon a man stepped into view. Short, round-shouldered, and wearing a worn brown apron dusted with what looked like flour. At first I wondered if he was a baker, but then I noticed the faint ink stains on his sleeves and the bundle under his arm. Long strips of bamboo, thin sheets of paper, and a roll of cord. A lantern maker, a real one. He stopped when he saw me sitting cross-legged among my small, glowing lantern village. His eyebrows lifted with a mixture of surprise and mild concern, perhaps for the structural integrity of my creations. But instead of scolding me or shooing me away, which he had every right to do, he walked over slowly, his sandals whispering against the stones. He examined my lanterns with his hands behind his back, nodding at one, tilting his head at another, giving a tiny, sympathetic frown at the green lantern, leaning dramatically to one side like it had fainted from the heat. Finally, he crouched beside me. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached into his apron and pulled out a tiny knife. Small, delicate, sharper than it looked. It glinted in the lantern light. Then, with the quiet focus of someone who has spent a lifetime in patient craftsmanship, he trimmed a few edges on my lopsided lantern. He folded one corner just slightly, adjusted the frame inside with a careful twist of bamboo, and tapped the top to settle its shape. And suddenly, it wasn't lopsided anymore. I stared at it like a miracle had taken place. He didn't even look at it. He just placed it beside the others with a small grunt of approval, as if to say, "There, now it can stand with the rest." He turned to me and said something gently in Japanese, slow enough that I caught the essence. Everyone starts as a beginner. And then he handed me something. A small bundle of fresh, uncreased paper. Smooth, crisp, perfect. The expensive kind. The good kind. The kind you only get from a craftsman who respects the art too much to hand out leftovers. I accepted it with both hands, because even though I might not be fluent in the language, I understood the gesture. It was an honor, an invitation. He nodded once more, stood up with a quiet groan, knees, universal language, and returned down the alley, his apron swaying behind him like the tail of a very tired bird. When he disappeared, I looked at the stack of perfect paper in my hands. For a moment, the alley felt suspended, like it had paused to see what I would do next. I placed one sheet on my lap. I ran my fingers along the edges. I breathed in the faint scent of mulberry bark from the fibers, and I began to fold, slowly, carefully, not trying to impress anyone, not the crow on the roof, not the orange tabby, not the lantern-making master who had just left just folding for the simple, quiet joy of it. The alley around me glowed and flickered. A breeze drifted through, carrying the soft rattle of distant wind chimes. Someone behind a sliding door laughed gently, and I kept folding, letting the paper guide my fingers the way the evening guided the light. The lantern slowly took shape, round and sturdy and almost elegant. Well, mostly elegant. But that was enough. And as I held it up to the warm light, I felt a little spark of something. Creativity, maybe. Or peace. or the simple magic of making something with my own hands in a quiet Tokyo alley where even the shadows seemed content to stay a while. After the lantern maker disappeared into the dimming alley, I sat for a little while, holding the fresh bundle of perfect paper he'd given me. It felt important. Not in a dramatic, destiny-shaping way. More like the kind of importance that comes from someone believing you're capable of more than your first attempt suggested. And honestly, that's one of the nicest feelings in the world. The lanterns around me flickered softly, casting round pools of warm color over the stones. The older woman's lantern still glowed the brightest, like a quiet little moon keeping watch. My newly folded lantern sat beside it, just slightly shy about its place in this makeshift family. And the others, the tired green one, the wobbly red one, the one that looked like it had emotional baggage, all rested quietly, as though appreciating the evening as much as I was. A breeze slipped through the alley. Not a strong one. The kind that barely moves your hair, just enough to make you pause and wonder if you felt anything at all. But it made the lanterns tremble, their warm halos fluttering like wings. And then, without warning, the breeze changed its mind entirely. It grew a little stronger, then stronger still, then enthusiastic. The paper scraps beside me skittered away across the stones like little white crabs. A bamboo ladle hanging outside someone's doorway knocked gently against the wood with a tok, tok, tok rhythm. Laundry above me swayed like it was rehearsing a graceful dance but hadn't memorized the steps. And the lanterns, the lanterns had opinions about the breeze. The green one, the fainting, leaning one, actually caught the wind like a tiny sail. It wobbled, spun, and then rolled away down the alley with surprising confidence. I watched it go, utterly betrayed. It didn't even hesitate. It just left. A man passing by glanced at it, rolling between his feet, looked at me, looked back at the lantern, shrugged, and kept walking. I suppose if you've lived in a Meiji-era alley long enough, you stop questioning runaway lanterns. I had half a mind to chase after it, but the breeze wasn't done causing mischief. My newly made lantern, the one I'd been so proud of, wiggled dangerously. I reached out to steady it, but the wind swirled again and puffed it just beyond my reach. Not fast, not frantic, just a gentle float upward, like it was deciding whether it wanted to become a cloud someday. I watched it rise above my head, the warm glow making a soft halo around it in the dusky air. It drifted a foot upward, then another, then dodged neatly around a dangling signboard as though it had been navigating alleys for years. It wasn't going high enough to get away completely, just far enough to make its independence known. I stood up, slowly, like someone who wasn't quite ready for unexpected exercise, and tried to catch it. But it floated backward just a little, teasing me. The orange tabby watched all of this from a stoop, squinting in that deeply unimpressed way cats have mastered over millennia. And then, perhaps realizing it had made its point, the lantern drifted downward again, landing softly on a wooden stool outside a nearby doorway. It looked as though someone had set it there intentionally, like a tiny glowing guest waiting patiently to be welcomed inside. I walked over, picked it up, and laughed softly to myself. The alley seemed to laugh back. The lanterns flickered, a door slid open somewhere, a child giggled in the distance. Even the wind sighed as though it had gotten whatever was bothering it out of its system. I returned to my spot on the stones and set the lantern down gently with the others. One was gone. One had taken a short adventure, and the others sat quietly, behaving themselves for the moment. The breeze calmed, the evening deepened, and I reached for another sheet of the lantern maker's perfect paper. Sometimes the wind just needs its moment, and sometimes, so do we. After rescuing my adventurous lantern from its short flight and settling it safely back among its companions, I sat down again with a little sigh, the kind of sigh you let out when your body remembers you're supposed to be relaxing, even if lanterns occasionally develop free will. I smoothed out another sheet of the lantern maker's perfect paper. Just touching it felt calming, like brushing your hand across cool silk. The fibers whispered quietly under my fingers, a soft rasping sound that somehow blended into the hum of the alley behind me. The evening was deepening now. Shadows lengthened. The lanterns brightened. A coolness settled over the stones. Somewhere far off, I heard a distant train whistle, faint but steady. A reminder that Tokyo in 1895 was a city balancing tradition and change, steam and wood, gas lamps and paper lanterns, new roads and old alleys like this one holding tight to their own slower time. I folded the paper carefully, trying to copy the movements the older craftsmen had shown me. One crease, then another, and then the tricky part, where the top edge had to wrap around like a shy cat curling its tail. It was going surprisingly well. Too well, which should have been my warning. When I placed the tiny candle inside and gently lit it with a taper someone had left on a nearby doorstep, a common courtesy in lantern-making neighborhoods, apparently, the lantern glowed beautifully for about 3 seconds, and then it went out. I frowned, relit it. 3 seconds of triumph, then out again. I tried shifting the candle. I tried adjusting the frame. I tried blowing on it gently, which didn't make any sense at all, but sometimes you blow on things when you aren't sure what else to do. Nothing. The lantern simply refused to stay lit, a stubborn little moon. I leaned back on my hands and stared at it, wondering what philosophical lesson it was trying to teach me. Some lanterns want to fly, others want to roll away, and some, apparently, just want to sit in the dark and contemplate their existence. The orange tabby watched me from its stoop, its tail flicking once as if unimpressed with my struggle. A man walking past with a basket of leeks glanced at the lantern, then at me, then made a small "ah" sound, like he understood completely. He knelt for a moment, plucked a single leek from his basket, and, without explanation, broke off a thin strand from the root. He handed the little strand to me with a polite nod. Before I could ask what I was meant to do with leek string, he was already walking away, the basket bobbing against his hip. I blinked, then shrugged. When in Tokyo, accept leek wisdom. I tied the tiny strand around the top of the candle to hold it straighter, slid it back into the lantern, and lit it again. The flame flickered, leaned, wobbled, and then steadied. The lantern glowed beautifully, holding its breath as though trying very hard not to disappoint the leek man. I whispered a quiet thank you into the air, unsure whether I meant it for the man, the leek, or the lantern. Probably all three. With the stubborn lantern finally glowing beside its companions, I felt a small wave of satisfaction, the kind that comes from fixing something small and simple that no one else would ever notice. The alley around me responded in its usual understated way. A bamboo wind chime clinked softly. The crow above me gave a gentle caw, which I chose to interpret as approving. And from somewhere inside a nearby house came the soft sound of someone sweeping tatami mats. That steady, soothing brush-back-brush rhythm. I leaned back again, hands behind me, and looked up at the slice of night sky visible between the rooftops. Deep indigo, a single early star twinkling faintly. The lantern beside me glowed warmly, proud of its accomplishment, and I felt the peaceful lull settle in again, ready to carry me into whatever the next lantern, or alley breeze, or mysterious produce-related stranger would bring. With the stubborn lantern finally glowing, thanks to one mysterious leek root strand that would probably baffle every scientist in the 21st century, I settled back into that peaceful end-of-evening feeling where everything around you softens just a little. Night had settled into the alley now, but it wasn't dark. Not really. The lanterns strung along the wooden storefronts cast warm halos of gold and amber, turning the narrow street into something that looked almost like a memory. The soft pools of light seemed to float in the air, hovering gently above the stone path like sleepy fireflies. I breathed in slowly. The air smelled faintly of miso, a hint of charcoal, and the lingering warmth of sun-baked wood cooling for the night. Somewhere far ahead, a door slid open with a soft wooden shh, followed by the quiet laughter of a family settling in for the evening meal. It made the whole alley feel alive in an unhurried, intimate way. I took another piece of paper from the craftsman's bundle. The older man's careful trimming and quiet guidance had given me a surprising confidence. Not a big, showy kind, but the sort that feels like a warm hand on your shoulder saying, "Go on, you can do this." So I folded, and this time the paper seemed to cooperate. Each crease landed where it belonged. Each bend made sense. Even the tricky wraparound part behaved itself. As I worked, I heard a sound behind me. Soft footsteps, then a gentle clunk of wood. I turned and saw a young girl, maybe 7 or 8, carrying a tiny shamisen. Not a full-sized one. This one was small enough that she held it like a cat she wasn't quite sure would sit still. Her eyes were wide and curious. She stared at me and my lanterns with the same expression people get when they find a foreign coin on the ground. Delighted, confused, and a little worried about whether they're allowed to touch it. She stepped closer, stopping right at the edge of the lantern light. I smiled softly and held up the lantern I was folding. She watched, entranced, as if expecting the paper to turn into a bird or fish at any moment. Then, without a word, she plucked one gentle note on the shamisen. Just one. A clean, bright sound that rang through the alley like a drop of water falling into a still pond. Then another, and another. Soft, tentative notes at first, like she was testing the alley's mood. Then a short, simple melody. Something sweet and repetitive, the way children's songs often are. It wove through the lantern light, curling around me like a ribbon. Her playing wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was honest and peaceful. A woman, her mother I assumed, appeared a moment later at the end of the alley, watching with tired but affectionate eyes. She didn't call the girl back. She simply leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely, as though this quiet, nighttime serenade was a normal part of their routine. The orange tabby cat slowly strolled over and sat beside the girl, as if to provide its professional audience services. The cat closed its eyes halfway, clearly approving of the performance. The girl played for a minute or two, each note dancing softly through the warm air. I folded my lantern in rhythm with her. Crease, pause, bend, note, note. And when she finished, she gave me a shy little bow. I returned it with the same solemn sincerity, because even small concerts deserve respect. She trotted back to her mother, who gave me a warm nod before sliding the door closed behind them. The melody lingered in the alley long after they were gone, humming gently in the spaces between the lantern light. And I realized how quiet everything else had become. Not empty, just settled. Soft, at peace. I looked down at my finished lantern. Round, simple, surprisingly symmetrical. Maybe the music helped. I set it gently with the others, now glowing in a little semicircle around me, a tiny sun family warming the stones. The night deepened. The lanterns shimmered softly, and I felt that quiet sense of belonging again, like the alley had pulled up a cushion and sat beside me for a while. The girl's soft shamisen melody still lingered in the alley long after she and her mother slipped back inside. It hovered gently in the warm space between the lanterns, drifting through the air like a memory that refused to dissolve completely. The lanterns around me glowed brighter now, not because they changed, but because the night had grown deep. The sky between the rooftops had turned almost velvety, that rich indigo shade that makes you think of ink drying on paper. I picked up another sheet of the lantern maker's good paper. It felt cool and crisp, and I realized I'd been working so long that the bundle he gave me was noticeably thinner. The thought made me strangely proud, like I'd earned some small badge in lantern folding. I started the first crease when I heard a kettle. Not a loud one. The soft tika-tika-tika sound of boiling water inside a metal pot, with a faint whistle that didn't seem completely committed to the job. Then footsteps approached. Slow, shuffling, familiar. An elderly man came into view carrying a small wooden tray balanced on one hand and a kettle in the other, a traveling tea cellar. I'd seen a few earlier in the day near the main road, men who wandered the streets offering warm green tea in tiny cups to passers-by. But this one looked like he might have been wandering since the dawn of civilization. He shuffled toward me, tray wobbling slightly, kettle bobbing in rhythm. His brows were white and bushy, his kimono patched lovingly in half a dozen places. One sleeve was rolled up, the other stubbornly drooping. His sandals looked older than Tokyo itself. He stopped in front of me and nodded deeply, much deeper than necessary, then held up one wrinkled finger as if telling me to wait. I wasn't going anywhere. He set the tray down beside me with surprising ceremony and poured a tiny cup of tea. The steam curled upward in a soft ribbon, smelling faintly of toasted rice and grassy sweetness. He handed it to me with both hands, the way one offers something sacred. I bowed my head in thanks, inhaled the aroma, and took a slow sip. It tasted like warmth and quiet, and the sort of comfort that makes you want to exhale a little longer than usual. The tea seller watched me expectantly, his eyebrows raised in hopeful anticipation. "It's perfect," I said softly. He nodded with satisfaction, then settled himself down on the stones right beside me, completely uninvited and perfectly welcome. He set his kettle down, with a thunk that suggested it had lived a very long life, and leaned over to inspect my lanterns. He didn't say a word, but his face expressed everything. Curiosity, surprise, concern, pride, confusion, and a brief moment where he seemed to wonder if one of them was intended to be shaped like a pumpkin. I sipped my tea again, letting the warmth settle into my chest. Then he reached into his sleeve, which seemed to function as a storage unit, and pulled out something unexpected. A wooden spoon. He stared at it, frowned, turned it over, then looked around in mild disbelief as though he recognized it but couldn't remember why. He set the spoon on the ground beside him, patted it twice like it had been misbehaving, and reached back into his sleeve. This time, he pulled out a small cloth bag filled with what sounded like dried beans. He shook it once, twice, nodded thoughtfully, and then put it back. Then a tiny bell, then a folded pair of socks, then a single rice cracker. He paused, looked at me, lifted the rice cracker slightly, and offered it. I accepted it politely because refusing a rice cracker gifted by a man who stores entire worlds inside his sleeve feels like bad luck. Finally, he pulled out the thing he seemed to have been looking for all along. A teacup. He stared at it with triumphant joy, like a sailor spotting land, and immediately poured himself a cup of tea. We drank together quietly, the lanterns glowing around us, the alley settling into a gentle hush. Somewhere nearby, a wooden door creaked. A dog barked once and then forgot what it was barking at. The crow above us gave a single sleepy purr. The tea seller lifted the wooden spoon again, sighed deeply, perhaps about the nature of spoons, tucked it back into his sleeve, and rose stiffly to his feet. He bowed once. I bowed back. Then he shuffled away into the lantern-lit night, trailing warm tea-scented steam behind him like a drifting cloud. I finished my cup, folded another crease in my paper, and let the quiet settle around me again. A soft, companionable silence warmed by lantern light and tea. The tea seller's quiet footsteps faded into the night, leaving behind a thin trail of steam and the faint scent of roasted rice. Even after he disappeared around the corner, I could still hear the little clink of his kettle lid tapping gently with each shuffle. I set my empty teacup down beside me, feeling the warmth still lingering in the clay. The lanterns flickered softly in approval, or maybe in jealousy. It's hard to tell with lanterns. They communicate mostly through glow-based body language. I picked up another sheet of paper from the slowly shrinking bundle. The alley had grown even quieter. The only sounds were the distant swish of a broom, the soft crackle of a charcoal brazier cooling somewhere nearby, and the tiny crackling from the candles inside the lanterns. I began folding again. My fingers felt more confident now. Not because I'd turned into a master lantern artist, but because, well, the alley had a way of teaching without teaching soft guidance. Gentle examples, encouragement from unexpected sources like leek-string philosophers and shamisen-playing children. The paper turned into something round again, this time a little sturdier, a little cleaner, a little more symmetrical. I puffed it out gently, lit the candle inside with the taper, and watched the glow spread like warm honey through the paper fibers. But before I could set it down with the others, someone else appeared. A soft voice, a boy's, murmured something down the alley. I looked up. It was the same boy who had passed earlier with the bamboo poles too long for his shoulders. But now, instead of poles, he carried a small woven basket balanced carefully between his hands. His sandals still clacked with every step. But this time he approached slowly, almost shyly, eyeing my lanterns with curiosity. He stopped a few feet from me and hesitated. The basket he held wasn't empty. Inside it lay a single lantern frame made of thin bamboo strips, but it wasn't covered in paper yet. Just the skeleton of a lantern. Fragile, but full of potential, something he had probably tried to make, or wanted to make. He glanced at my lanterns again, at the gentle glow, at the newest one still in my hands. Then he looked at me. I understood. I patted the ground beside me, inviting him to sit. He did, a little stiff at first, like he wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing. Children often have that look when joining a stranger who appears to be building a personal shrine to lanterns. He set the basket carefully between us. Then he picked up the bamboo frame with both hands, offering it like a fragile treasure. I smiled and nodded. Together we examined it. It was good, very good. The bamboo was cut neatly and tied with careful knots, the kind of knots a child learns from watching an elder. This lantern had family history woven into it. I reached into my bundle and handed him one of the good sheets of paper the craftsman had given me. His eyes widened. He touched the paper like it was too precious to be real. Then, slowly, he began wrapping it around the frame. At first, his fingers trembled, then steadied, then grew confident, mimicking the motions he'd seen around his home countless times. I guided gently when he hesitated. A tilt here, a crease there, but he did most of the work himself. His tongue poked from the corner of his mouth in concentration, the universal sign of childhood craftsmanship. When he finished, he held the lantern up proudly. It was beautiful. Not perfect, but full of heart. And that makes a lantern shine brighter than precision ever could. He beamed up at me. I nodded, matching his seriousness. We placed the lantern among mine, and I lit the tiny candle inside. The soft glow blossomed instantly, pulsing warmly through the paper. For a moment, the boy just stared at it. Then he reached out, very gently, and took my hand. Not for long, just a brief, sincere squeeze. Then he stood, bowed deeply, picked up his empty basket, and hurried back down the alley, the glow of his lantern following him like a loyal firefly. I watched him disappear into the night, his small silhouette framed by warm light and the soft sway of hanging lanterns. And when he was gone, I felt the alley settle again, deeper, warmer, as if tucking itself in for sleep. I leaned back, looked at the sky once more, and let the glow of all the lanterns, the beautiful ones, the crooked ones, the stubborn ones, lull me into that peaceful stillness only late-night moments can bring. The alley had grown so quiet now that even the lanterns seemed to whisper instead of glow. Their light felt softer, more settled, like they had finally found a comfortable spot and didn't want to move again for the rest of the night. The stones beneath me had cooled, but not too much, just enough to make me aware of them without feeling the need to shift around every few seconds. The lantern the boy made still flickered happily among mine, its warm glow bobbing gently, like it was proud to have joined the little lantern family. It leaned slightly to one side, but in a confident way, the kind of lean that says, "I did this myself." I took another slow breath, feeling the coolness of the night air mix with the warmth of all the tiny flames around me. I hadn't expected to spend the evening folding lanterns in a narrow Tokyo alley, but that's the thing about time traveling with a tired brain and a curious heart. You never know where you'll end up. Sometimes you wind up in a dusty library full of old clocks, or a field where goats think they're philosophers, or a street where a fish-shaped lantern floats away like it has errands. Tonight, it was lanterns, music, tea, and gentle company. I sat back and watched the alley, now almost completely still. The orange tabby gave one last slow blink before curling up near a warm patch of lantern light, its paws tucked under its chest in that perfectly cozy cat shape that looks like a loaf of bread. The crow above had finally decided the day was over and tucked its head into its feathers. Somewhere far off, someone closed a window carefully, the soft wooden slide of it blending with the night. I looked at the lanterns, the crooked ones, the perfect one, the stubborn one that needed leak magic, the fish who escaped earlier, the new one made by tiny hands, all of them glowing softly in a little semicircle around me like a miniature sunrise frozen in place. And there was something very comforting about that. I closed my eyes for a moment, just listening to the gentle burn of tiny flames and the distant murmur of a city falling asleep around me. But then, a warm pulse reminded me. A faint shimmer against my chest. Not loud, not urgent. Just a soft, steady glow, like a stone clearing its throat politely. I opened my eyes and looked down. The small, smooth stone tucked in my pocket, my quiet little traveling companion, was glowing faintly through the fabric. Just a muted golden shimmer, like it didn't want to disturb the lantern's peaceful mood, but also didn't want me forgetting that time doesn't stand still forever. I sighed gently, running my thumb over the pocket where the stone rested. It never forced me to leave. It just suggested, softly, that the moment was ready to become a memory. I stood slowly, careful not to disturb the lanterns. The boy's lantern glowed proudly. The older woman's lantern still stood steady and wise. The lantern maker's guidance lingered in the careful folds. The tea seller's warmth lingered in the cooling cup. This alley had been kind to me. I bowed toward the lanterns, a small thank you to the space, to the night, to the quiet, to the people who drifted in and out like characters passing through a dream. And then I let my hand slip into my cloak pocket. The stone warmed beneath my fingers, a soft pulse, like a heartbeat slowed by drowsiness. The lanterns blurred gently at the edges. The air shimmered. The alley grew soft, like the edges of a page turning, and as the glow wrapped around me, I whispered something, partly to the alley, partly to anyone listening, partly to myself. Thank you for the quiet. The lantern light stretched into a warm haze, softened, and the world shifted. But before I drifted completely away, I thought of you, the one listening. And I smiled, because you're always welcome to wander along with me, whenever you need something gentle, something slow, something soft and uneventful that helps your eyelids grow heavy. You can join me again. There's always another quiet place to visit, another sleepy moment waiting somewhere in time. And I'd be glad to have you with me for every one of them. So come back for more sleepy time adventures whenever you like. I'll be here, somewhere, folding lanterns, watching clocks, talking to goats, or waiting in a line that never quite moves, ready to wander with you again. Good night, my friend, and thank you for keeping me company tonight.